All right, this lesson is looking at how to construct and analyze data from box and whisker plots. So when you have a box and whisker plot, it's a graph per se of data that breaks it into 4 equal parts. If all the data is 100%, then each of the 4 equal parts is 25%, because 100 divided by 4 is 25%, right? So in order to make a box and whisker plot, you need 5 numbers. You need the maximum, which is sometimes called the upper extreme. You need the third quartile, which we've previously discussed how to find. You need the median, the first quartile, which is we previously also discussed how to find, and the minimum, which sometimes is called the lower extreme. So let's take a look at how to find some of these pieces of data. So we're looking at 2 charts here. We're looking at home runs, games at home, and home runs, games away on the right. So the first thing you want to find is your median. So again, to find the median, you want to go through, and luckily these numbers are already put in order. So we already have the maximum. If we're looking at the home games, it's just Toronto, which has 146, and Seattle being the minimum, which has 35. So in order to find the median, I want to cross off one from each side until I get to the one that is in the middle. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So in this case, it looks like we have 2 numbers that are in the middle. We have the 74 and the 72. So remember, in order to find what we have in the middle as our median, we have to take those values and add them together. So I have 74 plus 72. I add them together. 4 plus 2 is 6. 7 plus 7 is 14. And then because I added 2 numbers, I have to divide 146 by 2. So 2 goes into 14 exactly 7 times. There's nothing as a remainder. So then I'm looking at 6. 2 goes into 6 evenly 3 times. So my median is 73. I then have to find the median of my upper and my lower half of data to find my first and my third quartiles. So if I'm looking at the lower half of data, I'm looking at 72 through 35. In this case, we would include the 72 in our data because it is not the actual median. The actual median is 73, which is in here. So everything under that is considered part of the first quartile data. So 72 is under that, therefore we use 72. So I'm crossing off one from each side, the higher end and the lower end, until we get to the number that's in the middle. So now we have a number in the middle, so my Q1 would be 63. I want to do the same thing for the upper half of data. It's because 74 is above the 73 median, we use that as well. So I'm going to cross off one from the high end and one from the low end. So it looks like our median there is 98. So our Q3 is 98. I want to do exactly the same thing on the other side. So the good part about this is there is the same amount of numbers in each table. So the medians should be in the same locations. So then the actual median is in the middle column between the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5th and 6th columns. So I have 1, 2, 3, 5. So my median is going to be in between there. So I would take those two values, 75 and 73, and add them together. So 5 plus 3 is 8. Carry the 1. So then 7 plus 7 is 14. So I get 148, which I want to divide that by 2. 2 goes into 14 7 times. I have nothing there. 2 goes into 8 4 times. So my median is 74. So again, I'd have to find my upper and my lower quartile. So Q1 and Q3. So they would be in the same spot. So the lower quartile is third down from the right-hand column, so that would be 65. And my upper quartile would be the third up from the bottom on the left-hand side, which would be the 83. So now you have all of the numbers that you need for your box and whisker plot to create them. Before we actually talk about creating the box and whisker plots, let's take a look at the outliers. So if we're looking at the outliers, remember you have to take the IQR, which again is quartile 3 minus quartile 1, and we just found those two values, and we have to then figure out what the values are for the quartile 1 minus 1.5 times the IQR, and the quartile 3 plus 1.5 times the IQR. So to check for outliers, let's take a look at the away data. The IQR would be 35. So we'd want to take 35 and multiply it by 1.5. And for the away, the IQR is 18. So we again multiply that by 1.5. So we have to add those values to quartile 3 and subtract those values from quartile 1. So if we're looking at the home data says that we are looking at the lower boundary line, which sometimes I call the fences, of being 10.5. We have no data that's below 10.5, so nothing is an outlier in that case. If we add the 1.5 times the 35, the IQR, to the quartile 3, which we found was 98, then we have 150.5, and there is no value that is greater than 150.5. So the home games have no outliers. The away games, however, are a tad bit different. Their IQR is 18. So we take 1.5 times 18 and we subtract it from 65, which is the first quartile. We get 38. There is nothing below that on that end. So on that side, there are no outliers. However, on the large side, we take 83, which is quartile 3, and we add the 1.5 times the 18, which is the 1.5 times the IQR, and we get 110. There are two numbers that are greater than 110. So 111 and 113 are both considered outliers. So this is just a chart based on the data that we just found of the 5 numbers that you need to make a box and whisker plot. Again, the maximum, the third quartile, the median, the first quartile, and the minimum. So if you look at the bottom box and whisker plot, the first dot on the left-hand side is the minimum. Then we go to the first line of the rectangle. That is your Q1. The line in the middle of the rectangle is your median, and the line on the right-hand side of the rectangle is the Q3, and then the dot on the very far right is your maximum. Now, if you look at the away data, it's the same thing, except for we have some things that are a little bit different. If you recall, we just calculated that there were 2 outliers, 111 and 113. Those are the separate dots on the right-hand side. The next dot going towards the left, towards the box, is the next piece of data that we have that is part of the list. So it looks to be approximately 90. So that is that data. And notice the outliers are not connected to the rest of the box and whisker plot because they are data pieces that stick out. So in order to compare these, if we're looking at measures of center, remember we have 2 different measures of center. We have the median and we have the mean. In the box and whisker plot, you cannot see the mean, so we're looking at the median. If we're ignoring any of the outliers like the instructions say, the medians are approximately at the same location. So the measures of center, they're approximately the same. The measures of spread are the range, the IQR, and standard deviation. Standard deviation you cannot see here. So we need to take a look at the IQR, which is again is Q1 minus Q, or Q3 minus Q1, which essentially is the box or the rectangular part of the box and whisker plot, and the range, which is your maximum minus your minimum. So if we look at the home games, the box and whisker plot for the home games is very much so longer than the box and whisker plot for the away games. So it has a larger measure of spread. The distribution, if we look at the distribution, remember we have three types of distribution. Symmetric, meaning it's the same on both sides of the middle. Skewed right, which means it has a little bit of data that's far away from the rest on the right. And skewed left, which means it has a little bit of data which is farther from the rest on the left. So if we're looking at the distribution for away games, it is more symmetric than for the home game.